So this is part 2 of the Wilton Village videos. This is Wilton Village as I remember it. This is a postcard of Wilton. It's all very picturesque, but the cottage was in a terrible mess inside. Very, very small, very dark, with these little diamond paned windows which they removed. And these are the cottages on the old photograph with the diamond windows facing the church. It looked nice in this evening sunshine. The one on the right was lived in by the Cole family. Mrs. Ivy Cole. She was a Labour councillor for years and years and years and years. She worked in the one of the canteens on the site. Very early photograph of Wilton Village, taken I would think in the 1880s, 1890s. This tree here is absolutely enormous now. And this little monument, this little ornament in the middle of the lawns has disappeared. All these cottages have been sold off with the disappearance of ICI, all privately owned. But they were the estate tied cottages. If you to live in them you had to work on the estate in some capacity or other for the Lowthers. This is the village in 1968. You can see the size of that tree now. And these Indian cedars, both of which have gone. There was one at this end and one at the other end, and I think they've both disappeared. Unfortunately, they were beautiful trees. And this is Wilton Village. And you can see just how big that tree is. It was on that very early photograph. It's an absolutely enormous thing. There's a nice Indian cedar on the end of the lawn there, and there used to be another one at this end. There used to be a little memorial thing in the middle. The big cedar at this end has disappeared. The whole village is now grade 2 listed. Always lots of these at Wilton. This is a very early hand-covered, coloured view of Wilton Church. I suspect it was taken about 1880s. And I notice there are no gravestones here on the left-hand side. And all the trees are very small. And this is Wilton Church 2005. This is just a view of the east end of Wilton Church in 1991. This is Wilton Churchyard, St Cuthbert's at Wilton near Redcar. Wonderful bird song. Another view of Wilton Church. This building at Wilton Village was originally a school, parochial school, which closed down in the 1920s, but there were people in Lazenby Village who can remember going there. This big window here has coloured glass around it, which is supposedly the Lowther racing colours. I don't know whether it's still there or not. But when ICI took over or bought Wilton Estate in 1945, this was the joiner's workshop. And then later on it was, when ICI sold out, the building was sold and is now a private dwelling. And this building on this side here, this one, was Forensi's shop. A little tiny shop, didn't sell very much, but it did make excellent black currant ice lollies, I remember. And they had a daughter, Catherine, who was a bit older than I was. It also has a Victorian postbox set in a wall, which is still there. And the whole village is Grade 2 listed, including this telephone box, which is one of the rarer ones, I understand. So this is the window on the end of the schoolhouse, and you can see that coloured glass there, which was supposedly Lowther's racing colours, sort of amber and blue or orange and blue. It's been beautifully renovated. This is the what was Forensi's shop. It's a beautiful property. This is the Victorian postbox. It isn't actually attached to the shop. It's attached to number 4. The shop is next door. And this house where you can see the roof, that was the gamekeeper's house. The gamekeeper in my time was a fellow called Cliff Garbett. He had in fact worked for the Lowthers and continued working for ICI afterwards. He always seemed to smoke binges. I never saw him with a whole cigarette. He always seemed to have a little stubby bit in his mouth. That was the house where the sort of land agent lived, a fellow called Wolf in my time, Ted Wolf. But eventually Lister's moved into there. John Lister was the blacksmith's son, but he got a degree in chemistry from London and became an ICI director eventually. And his wife taught in the local school at Lazenby. And although these places look really big, they were in fact divided up. Very confusing. And this little track down here led to the woodyard. And on the right hand side they are the woodyard buildings, which have now been converted into a house. Also down there were the kennels. And a chap called Scaife, he had a little small holding down there. He used to keep the odd cow. Buildings here used to be a huge circular saw, an absolutely enormous thing. Frightening. Lots of names to conjure with in here. Cliff Garbutt was the gamekeeper, he was the man in charge of everybody. And then there was Jim Brighton, who was a leading hand, and then there were the Ron and Ray Smith, brothers from Lackenby, Barry Lyons, a lad called Prev, I didn't know his other name, and another youth, another great big tall fella, Vic Tucker from New Mask. They were the main names, and then RCI decided that they would put everything out to private contracts, and that was the end of it. The Woodyard boys and the blokes in the gardens. Yeah. One of the older chaps was called Freddie Glasper. He lived at North Lodge with his daughters, and he'd worked for the Lowthers for a long time, and he was retained by ICI. He knew where all the land drains were, all the culverts. So if there was ever a problem, he was called upon. But speaking to the blokes who worked with him, the other lads in the Woodyard, they said that his big advantage was that he could smell Cliff Garbutt cigarette smoke at about 200 yards. So if they were sitting having a break and Freddie Glasper would suddenly say, Garbutt's coming, and they'd all leap up and start working, and true enough, round the corner Cliff Garbutt would appear. Fred's name, his nickname was Fly. He was always called Fly. I suspect it was because he was a sort of fly individual. And his other major weakness was hunting. If they were working on the estate, and it was a big estate, they were working in the woodland, if there was any sign of the hunt, either a hunting horn being blown or the yelping of hounds, if you turned your back on Fly and then turned back round, it disappeared. And this was the missions to seamen at Wilton, to provide a sort of hotel for merchant seamen. They much preferred the bright lights of Middlesbrough, and so it didn't last very long at all, and has been sold off and is now a private dwelling. This is when they sold Flying Angel House at the missions to seamen at Wilton. 1983 they sold it. After the sale, this house wasn't a cottage by any stretch of the imagination. This house was sold, and they're now independent of one another. This place with a pavilion was converted into a nursing home. Which the first fees were £175 a week. I suspect they're an awful lot more than that now. So you can see there it was built in 1964 and sold it in 1983, so it didn't last very long as a mission. It must have cost a fortune to do, because the quality of the fittings was just magnificent inside. But it was a big mistake to build it at Wilton Village. A big mistake. Now if you were a seaman When you arrive in port, the last thing you want, particularly if you're foreign, like Filipino or Thai from the Far East, and you don't speak English, then you don't want to be sitting up at Wilton. You want to be down in the, in the flesh pots of Middlesbrough or wherever. So when they sold this, they moved down into Middlesbrough from whence they had come. As I said before, this was sold off afterwards, so I can't remember how much it was. I think it was something like £30,000 they wanted for it, but I could be wildly out on that. And £1,472 was a lot of money. The rates on the property. So they only got a small part of that field, but I think subsequently they've bought the lot. Which of course would be, it was madness to sell it without the rest of the field. It does no particular use at all. This is the admissions to seamen in 2013. The building on the left was a pavilion. It used to show films and things in there. And that's the actual mission itself, and behind it was a house. The whole lot was sold for £90,000 in 1983. There's now a nursing home. Very nice too. This is the kissing gate at the top of the field, which has the former missions to seamen in. It's the footpath across the fields to go into Wilton Woods. This is in 1968. This is a kissing gate at Wilton in 2013. A sad and sorry relic of what it used to be like. What a shame. If you follow this fence along to the east, going towards Yerby, there used to be another one. So let's see if it's still there. And leading up from the kissing gate, this was the track which led up to Lovell Hill Farms, where the caddies lived, which has now been demolished. And there it is. The tops have been smashed off these cast iron poles, unfortunately. But the gate itself is still there, and it works, not the point. There's this unique automatic closing system at the bottom. Oh, that's it. In need of a little tender loving care. Nevertheless, it's nice to see it's still here. It should be listed. everything else in this part of the world seems to be listed. I used to come down from Dunsdale into a couple of ponds, and this is one of them, although wildly overgrown now. And at the very bottom it had a sluice gate, remnants of which you can see here. It's all in a sorry mess. And it went under a culvert, under the roadway to Dunsdale, which is all in a state of collapse, unfortunately. So this is the carriageway which ran from Wilton Castle over the bridge at the bottom of Wilton Bank, and then along here all the way to East Lodge and Dunsdale. The garlic is just absolutely amazing. The smell is almost overpowering. The carriageway went through what is now a jungle and across a bridge at the bottom of Wilton Bank. And there was a gate here, beyond which were the castle grounds, and they were very, very private. The gate posts remain, huge blocks of sandstone set into the ground. I'm surprised they're still here. But there used to be a big white gate on here, and just there was the bridge over the Gisra Road at the bottom of Wilton Bank, and all that was very, very private. And here the rhododendrons. This is just the beginning of June. They're just coming out. This wonderful iron fence which is there's miles of it, all in a tremendous state of disrepair. You can see Wilton Castle in the evening sunshine. And down there, where that wooden fence is, used to be a big stable block. Now as a kid it's all been demolished. You can see it marked on the maps, the 1953 map. You can see a stable there. The beck used to come down Waterfall Gill, and it ran under this field and came out on the other side of the road going to the golf course, a place which we call Black Bess. Oh, the carriageway continued along here and over a very nice bridge, waterfall bridge, or lines of bridges we knew it. Only the parapets remained. And in the wood here is a monument which has absolutely nothing written on it. Supposedly for one of the Lowther's donkeys died, but some old chap had mentioned, but it was, I had another tale it was to some hounds that were killed that ran off the side of the bridge, but who knows. I suspect it's just an ornament. Decoration. And this tree at the back of Wilton Castle was planted by Councillor Morgan. There's a little plaque on a stone here. How long it'll be, I don't know. In 1976. I think it's a hornbeam. Well, it could be a beech tree. Yeah, here's a little horse coming to have a look at us. And in the undergrowth, just on the right of this track going towards the castle, is this little plaques of the Wilton tree planting panel, the chairman of whom is 1962. The planting of all the specimen trees in this wood and the adjoining parkland was initiated by the Wilton tree planting panel. The chairman was a fellow called Neil Charlton. He lived at 11 Eston Road on the Wilton Green estate. And there are some wonderful trees. This is Wilton Castle from the east in 1968, with its immaculate tennis court and immaculate lawns. And around the tennis court, in that sort of amphitheatre, were some wonderful shrubs and flowers. ICI put a great big window in here, on this corner here. It cost an absolute fortune. I seem to think the figure was 5,000 quid. An absolute mint. Anyway, now you cannot see this view because this shrubbery here is almost the height of the castle itself. But it's just a wonderful view. This is where the photograph of the east end of the castle was taken in 1967. You can see by the growth, you cannot see it now at all. This is the tennis court. It's in a sad state of disrepair, unfortunately. But all these grounds were kept immaculate in ICI's time. While young fellas like Bob Linus and Mike Thompson, they were the two come to mind. This lawn was absolutely beautiful. I mean, it gets cut now, but it's just a rough cut. So in 1999, ICI, in desperate financial straits, decided they would sell the whole lot. And this is the bit of the brochure relevant to the village. And so that was it, end of an era.